Okay, let's look at these practice questions. Holding everything else constant, the government deficit A tends to increase during recession. That's true. In the recession, usually the government will initiate expansionary fiscal policy by increasing government spending, increase in transfer, decrease tax. B tends to increase during expansion. That's not true. Usually during the expansion, the government had some contractionary fiscal policy to cool down the economy. C will increase is if the government pursues expansionary fiscal policy. That's true, right? Because as I just explained, during recession, the government won't initiate expansionary fiscal policy. So that's going to lead to larger deficit. So the answer is D. Both A and C are correct. Okay. All right. So the government has a budget, and then sometimes, as we see in history, so the government runs a deficit. But not everyone agree or not everyone think so the government should have some deficit, or there's some disagreement regarding to this government deficit. Okay, so there are several views on this. Some believe so we should require an annual balanced budget, right? But if we require an annual balanced budget, and then so we are going to lose the ability to help during the recession, right? Just remember, so during the recession, so the way we can help the economy is to pursue expansionary fiscal policy. In order to pursue an expansionary fiscal policy, you must, as a consequence of expansionary fiscal policy, usually you will run a deficit. But now if you are required to maintain a balanced budget, and then that means you cannot run a deficit, meaning so you can't run expansionary fiscal policy, right? So that just means you will lose the ability to help during recession, right? But then somebody else may say, okay, so you should balance the budget over the business cycle on average. So that may be a better idea. That just says you allows your budget to fluctuate, but on average is balanced. Okay. And finally, so somebody say, okay, so we just trust the politician to keep the long run budget healthy. So that can be a problem, right? So most of the time, so you cannot trust the politicians, because the politicians, so they may want to, so what is their main goal or main objective? So they may want to win re-election or win the office, right? And then so they may just pursue some expansionary fiscal policy so that just keep the economy growing so they can win the electoral vote. So that's the concern, or that's a problem. Okay, so basically, so let me elaborate a little bit more on this. So we write this equation. So the budget or the deficit, like is, that's what we said earlier, is equal to, so this is the deficit, right? So equal to G plus TR minus T, right? What is a balanced budget mean? Balanced budget means, so the right-hand side equal to 0. So now if this is equal to 0, and then so you're going to lose the ability to increase G and increase T and decrease, increase TR and decrease T when it is necessary, like a recession. So this regarding to here, right? And then somebody else says, okay, so why not we just allows the budget to fluctuate, and then so we just pursue a long run average of 0, right? So this average is for Just you make sure in the long run, so you have a balanced budget. And then the concern is, so like here, so we are in a recession. And then so we have expansionary fiscal policy. We allows for deficit. But once the economy becomes healthier, becomes better, and then presumably you should reduce the deficit. But the politician or whoever runs office, they may not want to do that. Right? So instead of reduce the deficit, they may want to keep raising the deficit. What's the benefit of doing that? Is because by keeping the deficit high, so literally, so they increase government spending, increase transfer, decrease tax. Okay, so you are going to increase aggregate demand, you're going to generate more jobs. So that's going to help your election. So that is the concern of trusting the politicians to keep the long run budget healthy. Right. Right. So now we can look at a case study. Look at Europe. So there are some European nations, or I would say most Western European countries. So they adopt a common currency. It's called euro. So that this idea actually largely was proposed or was largely invented by Bob Mondale. So this is a Nobel Prize winner, but sadly he passed away last week. He's considered the founding father of euro. Okay, so in European countries, most Western European countries, they adopt this common currency. It's called euro. But in order to discipline each individual countries and to join the euro, so each government was required to keep their budget deficit below 3% of their GDP. So, but that's going to create some problem, right? As we just see in previous slides. When you are hit by a deep recession, you lose the ability to use fiscal policy, right? So that's what happens in some part of the Europe. Okay. In the United States, so we had its own version of this original but flawed European Stability Pact. So the constitution of 40 of the 50 states required a balanced budget every year. And then, so it's no surprise when recession struck in 2008, most states were forced to slash spending and raise taxes. But apparently based on what we discussed, so this is a wrong policy, because in the recession, so you want to have expansionary fiscal policy, meaning so you want to have larger deficit instead of smaller deficit. Right. And so this fiscal policy, I mean, depending on how you carry your fiscal policy, is going to have long run impact, right? So here, this example show you, right? So what we have here, so this is from 2007 to 2015. So we look at interest rate on 10-year bond. But what is this 10-year bond? Essentially, this is the main financial vehicles the government can rely on to borrow. But then, so why the government need to borrow? So again, so this is to finance their deficit, right? Otherwise, where your money coming from, or where your resource coming from, right? So the interest rate increase, meaning it becomes more expensive to borrow, meaning your ability to borrow will be limited, right? So now we look at two countries. One is Germany, the other is Greece. So you can see, so for the Greece, so their cost of borrowing spiked. And so that's during 2012. right? But Germany, so their borrowing cost was very stable, and also like present a secular declining trend. So meaning, so they can borrow cheaply, so they have no problem to finance their deficit. But that's not the case for Greece. The Greece, during the time, so they really need to finance their deficit. It turns out they find out it's difficult to borrow. And that is coming from, they have a long-standing issue of budget deficit, right? So their fiscal policy wasn't prudent. And so the investor realized, or investor believe, so they are going to have hard time to repay their debt. So they don't want to lend to Greece. So that just makes the Greece problem even worse. Okay. Right. So now I want to emphasize the difference between deficit versus debt. So they are linked to each other, but they are different things. Deficit is the difference between amount, the money the government spent, and the amount it received. So basically, deficit equal to G plus TR minus tax revenue. But what is debt? Debt is the sum of money the government owns at a particular time, right? But so you have more deficit, you're accumulating debt, meaning so you're going to increase your, sorry, if you accumulate, if you keep running the deficit, so that means your debt will pile up, right? Because so how are you going to finance your deficit? So basically, you're through borrowing. The more deficit you have, then the more you have to borrow to pay off your deficit, right? So here is overview for the government deficit, okay, by different countries. So United States here, oh, by the way, so this is old data. So this is in, I believe it's 2014. So currently, so the US government, the debt is more than, it's more than 100%, right? But now you can see here is the Greece, their debt, their debt is more than 168% of total GDP. So there's only one country who's running the who has saving or negative debt, which is Norway. So that's the only country in the world. So they have saving instead of debt. So this has largely to do with their oil reserve. Okay. So now let's see what are the problem can cause by rising government debt. So the public debt may crowd out investment spending. Why is that? It's because, so in the financial market, so we have limited amount of financial resource people can use. If the government borrow a lot through public debt, and then the private sector has less to borrow. So that's going to crowd out investment. So if the investment has been depressed, that's going to reduce long-run economic growth. Because the long-run economic growth, one source of long-run economic growth coming from investment, right? You can remember, so the long-run economic growth depending on technology, depending on capital stock, depending on labor supply, right? So this depressed investment will reduce your capital stock. It can also reduce your technology, because without investment, you may not able to do necessary R&D to boost up your technology. Okay. In extreme case, rising debt will lead to government default. What is the government default? Is the government fail to make a payment to their due obligations. Just think about individuals. Someone may default on their house, or we call the foreclosure, similar, right? But what is the cause of the government default? The government default will result in economic turmoils, right? So first, so if the government default, And then, so the government cannot borrow in the financial market. So the government cannot finance their spending and transfer in that particular year, or has a limited ability to do that. That is first. The second is if the government default, so the financial market may hurt as well, because people is going to lose the confidence to that particular country, right? And then the financial market may freeze. So in the modern economy, we rely on financial market to China through the investment. If the financial market freeze, and then so all the investment or all the financial transaction will be disrupted. So you can see that's going to cause a huge trouble to our economy, right? So then some students may be wondering, so why not the government just printing money to pay their bills? Okay. In principle, yes, it can, but this is not a free lunch, right? So if you just keep printing money to pay your bills, so we are going to have inflation. You may remind yourself what's going to be the cause of inflation. In the worst case scenario, so the government lose their reputation, or the government the money lose their value. No one wants to hold government money anymore. So the government is going to lose the ability to finance their spending altogether, right? But we will talk about that later. Okay, so regarding to the long-term health of our sustainability or the government fiscal policy, so one way we look at is debt to GDP ratio. Okay, and here, so I show you the budget deficit and debt GDP ratio. So you can see these two attract each other. And largely because, so if you run a deficit and then so you start to accumulate debt, if you have surplus, and then so you're going to reduce your debt, right? Because you have extra money in that year, so you can pay off your debt. So that being said, so these two should move in the same direction, right? And this slide is a new slide updated with 2020, right? So this is a deficit. Okay, look at here, since 2000, most of the time, I would say like 90% of the time, so the US government is running deficit. And then particularly, so when we are in a recession, like a 2008, 2009 financial crisis, and now so we have another kind of man-made recession. Okay, we have COVID-19 pandemic. So you can see the deficit spike. And then, so with no surprise, that is going to have impact on the government debt, right? So this is translated into ever larger government debt, right? So loss apart, but this still belongs to government debt, is implicit liability. What we have learned so far is deficit and the debt, right? But there's one thing hidden, but that's important to understand. The debt issue is implicit liability. What is implicit liability? So those are spending promised made by government. Okay, they are effectively debt, even though they are not included in the debt statistics. What examples? So the implicit liability, here are the example. Think about Social Security, think about Medicare. Okay, but what is Social Security? Social Security is the government program that pay the elderly a monthly stipend or monthly check, right? So you can think about this like kind of pension. Okay, but this is a promise made by the government. Regardless what happens, the government must pay certain amount to retirees. because those people who is going to retire in the future, so they made contributions when they are young, when they were working. The other thing is Medicare, right? Medicare is also a implicit liability, right? So what's Medicare? So largely this is finance the healthcare for elderly. Okay, so why the government must keep the promise? Because when those people were young and in a working age, they paid Medicare tax to finance existing elderly, right? So both Medicare and Social Security are promise made by the government, okay? And then so those spending must enter the government's budget. And because we are entering an aging population, and because health expenditure becomes more and more expensive, so that's going to have implications on our long-term debt, right? So look at this projection. So you can see the size of Social Security and the Medicare as a percentage of GDP is increasing. So that means in the medium term or long term for the US government, so if everything else keeps constant, we are going to see the deficit will become larger and larger, because every year you're going to spend more on Medicare and more on Social Security. So, and then the larger deficit down the road, that's going to imply we must have larger debt to GDP ratio. Okay, so that can be a problem for the long-term health of our fiscal sustainability, right? Okay, so I guess I'm going to stop here for today's class. And so next week, we will start the last chapter, which is going to be money and monetary policy, right? Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to see you next week, and have a great weekend. Thank you.